Thank you, Sandy. So let me get my screen up. Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Peace to you all, and welcome to the third class in the spring session of Interfaith Explorations. We are focusing on spirituality in our daily life and learning and practicing the spiritual traits and qualities that would enhance the spiritual presence in our daily life. My name is Sophia Said. I'm your host and the executive director of the Interfaith Center. Along with me is Dr. J. McDaniel. Sandy, if you can highlight Jay, who is our teacher and moderator, who chairs the Cobb Institute. Cobb Institute and the Center for Process Studies are the co-host and co-sponsors for this class, and we are very glad to be sharing the sponsorship with them. Our main resource for the class, many of you know, is the Spirituality and Practice website. If you have not been there, please take a moment to do so during the next week. It is developed by Frederick and Mary Ann Brissett, and we use that as our text. It's a very multi-faith and inter-spiritual website, which has resources for the spiritual journey for people from all different faiths and for people of no faith. If you miss any session of our series, they are all available on YouTube, and I'm also sending them to you in a weekly email. So today's class is focusing on E for enthusiasm and F for forgiveness. With that, I will give it to Jay and see what letter he's going to start us with today.
Well, hello to everybody. And when Sophia and I began to think about this, we decided to use letters that we had not used before. And so one that we had not dealt with was E for enthusiasm, or F, and another was F for forgiveness. And I have to admit, when I really began to think about these two letters, I wasn't all that enthusiastic about E for enthusiasm. I don't know if I thought maybe I'm not that enthusiastic a person. I don't know, I had all these self-doubts. So I did go to Spirituality and Practice to look up what they said. And it was interesting. It was a little better. I'll read it to you. They say the word enthusiasm is derived from the roots en, which means in or within, and theos, which means God. So it means having God within or being one with God. And then it adds people with this gift carry a special kind of energy. They bring warmth and feeling to their relationships and vigor and freshness to their activities. And they have one more paragraph, and it goes like this. To practice enthusiasm, make others aware when you are excited about something. Throw yourself into your projects. Be known for your eagerness, your curiosity, your willingness to give it all you've got. Proclaim your passions. Hold nothing back. Sing your heart out. And so I thought, oh, well, that is kind of interesting. So when you sing your heart out, or you hold nothing back, or you really give yourself to something, you're infused by God? That's the way that God is inside you? I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. So then I started thinking about, who do I know that embody that? And I looked at the films that Spirituality and Practice recommended, and one of them was on Julia Child. Now, I don't know if you know who Julia Child is, but I want to show you the photograph at the top of the page. So I'm going to share the screen just for a minute. This is my screen. Here comes. And yeah, there she is. Can you see her there? And look at that face. And, she specialized in preparing meals. She loved to cook. And she kind of threw herself into it and had a great career as a TV personality, sharing her love of cooking. And you look at how she holds up, and they named the film Bon Appetit. Bon Appetit. So I began to think of that phrase, Bon Appetit. Good appetite. And I thought, Julia has that spirit. And you and I all know people that have that spirit. They throw themselves into something. Now, some of us only do that in certain moments of our lives. I think 4 times a week for 10 minutes, I have that bon appetit spirit. But some people's very personalities, it's just built into their personalities just to throw everything into what they love. And so we can call that the enthusiastic personality. And I couldn't wait to come to you today and talk about this and use Julia Child as an example. And that's when I woke up in the middle of the night and started thinking about Sophia. And it went like this. This is Ramadan. People are fasting. This is Lent, a Christian time of subduing, letting go of those bodily passions. I think Passover for Jews is a little friendlier. So I wasn't so worried about Passover, but I really started thinking about traditions for whom fasting is important. And we're in the middle of one. And here I'm coming to give a talk called Bon Appetit. So I couldn't wait to talk to Sophia today. And I just did. And Sophia, you can see why immediately I wanted to know, what is it like after the fast ends? And why I was so glad to hear what you said, because it's kind of like a party. Is that right? Describe it for a bit. Just tell everybody what you said to me.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up, because I've been thinking about enthusiasm as well, and what it means to me. So first, let me answer your question, and then I will say a little bit about enthusiasm. So we are in the middle of Ramadan, not in the middle, we are at the beginning of Ramadan, which is a month where Muslims fast for 30 days in a row. And fasting to us means that we stop eating, drinking, or putting anything in our body, and staying away from any body, physical, or sexual pleasure from dawn till sunset, which is almost 14 hours nowadays, from 5:30 a.m. till 7:30 p.m. And at 7:30 p.m., if I'm in Arkansas, I would go to the mosque, Medina Institute, and we would all break a fast together. And I'm speaking around between 200 and 300 people every night. Families would come together and break the fast together. And then we will go to the prayer hall and pray for 10 to 15 minutes, then come back to the fellowship hall and eat a dinner together, have dessert together, have tea together. Children would play in the gym area, have fun. Community and families will hang out together till 8:45 or 9 p.m. And then at 9 p.m., nightly prayers start, which go almost till 11 p.m. And we pray from 9 to 11 p.m. every single night. And then after 11 p.m., we wrap up, clean up, and get ready to do the same thing all over again next night. So that goes on for 30 nights nowadays. And we are on the 7th night tonight. And I'm pretty sure that it's a very similar scene in any other mosque in the country. Jay, does that answer your question?
Yeah. And did you want to share anything? I have actually more to say, but did you want to share something else? Or
I was thinking about enthusiasm yesterday. And I also went back to spirituality and practice and read about it. And I love how they defined enthusiasm, that it means having God within or being one with God. And then I read that quote in which it was said that Walt Whitman, when he first read Ralph Waldo Emerson,
Mhm.
said that I was simmering and Emerson brought me to a boil. And I loved it. And because Emerson
No,
brought,
so
um,
a boil.
yeah, so Walt Whitman said that after his first reading of Emerson, that I was simmering and Emerson brought me to a boil. And I was thinking that we all have things or readings or movies in our life. We have actions or people or situations in our life that generate this godly energy in us,
Hmm.
which got me to thinking, what is it in my life? I
Mhm.
did an enthusiasm checklist of myself. What is it in my life which makes me filled with God or brings this enthusiasm in me? And it was clearly Medina, my
Mhm.
mosque. And those of you who don't know, this is a mosque which I helped start. It's a space that I helped create, and it's a space where my vision of community is being created every night, and which is helping make connections happen. So the moment I walk into a building, and it's been happening over and over again for last 7 years, I am filled with enthusiasm. I'm filled with this godly energy which is unique for me myself. So I wanted to pose this question to the class after your initial teaching is done, that what is it in your life that makes you feel most alive or very passionate about something? Is it a person, a situation, a space? So that is what I've been thinking.
Sophia, that's the question I wanted to lift up as well. But I'd like to say something before that. I know that we can be enthusiastic about particular things. Um, I'm enthusiastic about music. I'm enthusiastic about playing guitar. I'm enthusiastic about dogs. I just love them. I'm enthusiastic about new ideas. So they're the things that we can be enthusiastic about. But there's also, people who are enthusiastic about life. And I just wanted to lift up that phrase, enthusiasm for life. And they're in love with life. And whatever they do, they pour themselves into. And their lives are really very intense. It's not always happy, but it is intense. And there is the enthusiasm. And that can include the pleasures of life, the pleasures, food, eating, drinking, moving. And I think there has been a tension, just to name this, between historical religions and pleasure. And there are ways of being religious where religion is about being good or doing the right thing or being obedient to God or about justice, about all things compassionate, about ethics. But there's a little bit of ambiguity on pleasure. Got to be careful with pleasure. And where you really see that prominent is in certain forms of Christianity that inherited that dualism between mind and matter, spirit and flesh. They inherited it from the Greeks, actually, not from Judaism. But you do find that in Christianity. You may find it in Islam. I won't say, but there may be a sense in which enthusiasm is kind of when it includes gusto for life, in love with life. It may present a little bit of a challenge to certain forms of religion that have that dualism. So I just wanted to name that fact. We don't need to stay there too long, but do you know any people like I'm thinking about that they're just in love with life? It's enthusiasm for the whole thing.
When I think of being enthusiastic, the first thing that I think of is children, babies.
Uh-huh.
When a baby feels an emotion, sadness, tiredness, joy, whatever it is, hunger, their entire body just expresses that feeling.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me. I mean, yeah, how babies do that.
Nothing held back.
No,
Nothing held back.
no ambiguity.
Well, with that in mind, and also, does it make sense to you to say that the person that's in love with life, in that deep way, they give their whole selves to life, L'chaim, that is not always happy, but very intense.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. When you cry, you really cry.
Mm.
When you laugh, you really laugh.
And the other thing with baby is it's so instantaneous. Like in a split second, they're not unhappy anymore. They're not hungry.
Deb, we can't hear you when you.
In a split second, they're not unhappy. They're not hungry. It's just on and off. There's no lag time.
So a question for you, when you think of spirituality, whatever that means to you,
Mm-hmm.
does giving it your all, the singing your heart out, throwing yourself into life itself with nothing left behind,
Right.
nothing left behind. Does that come to your mind when you think of spirituality or religion, or by contrast, not so? I'm just kind of curious there.
Now that I'm older, I find it harder to throw myself wholeheartedly into a lot of things. But the one thing I remember when I was younger, as a child, even as a young adult, was if I was doing something, it was all the way.
Yeah.
That I was very reckless in a lot of situations. And the thing that really brings me joy now is the feeling of community, the feeling of community. When you are really in sync with another person or a group of people, that is just a wonderful feeling. And I always found great comfort that my religion, in terms of that as a Jew, I'm commanded to be joyful. I'm commanded to enjoy life, to, feel at one with the universe. I love that. It's a very comforting and secure feeling that I have to do it.
That's one of many reasons I'm so envious of Judaism. I've been looking for that commandment all my life. That's a great one. Now, anybody else want to speak before we turn to specifics of I feel enthusiastic about this or that, just the enthusiastic life as a lifestyle. Anybody else want to make a comment or
Hey Jay, this is Jerry
Yeah.
Adams. I originally I wasn't that enthusiastic about enthusiastic being on the list, but your comments have been very helpful. But there is an authenticity. There's a authenticity about people that are enthusiastic. It's not like, oh, let's do some enthusiasm in the next hour. Let's go get, let's go get enthusiastic, because I think it's almost an innate quality that you can rejoice and be influenced by someone who's authentically enthusiastic, but you can be put off by somebody who takes kind of a cheerleader role with enthusiasm as like, well, let's have a good time for the next hour or something like that. So I do think when you see it, you know it, and it just is, it's just wonderful. But it does have a false aspect to it if it's not honest or and accurate.
Yeah. Anybody else? Thank you, Julie.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, let's see if anybody else wants to talk first. Okay, Kim. I think Kim has something to say. Go ahead, Kim.
Well, I just wanted to say this was a very good insight for me from this idea of it being God in God, God in you, because I would say that I have always been probably a very enthusiastic person. I mean, you describe me pretty well in that, but also in terms of bringing in the ups and the downs of being that way. And so sometimes it takes, some heavy downs to take you to a place of trying to not moderate it so much as to exactly what the woman said a minute ago. We have a commandment for joy and to feel okay about it. Even though it can be disappointing at times to have great enthusiasm, throw yourself into something and be extremely disappointed or disillusioned, but yet then you have to go on. And so that was a good
Thank you. Yeah, Kim, thanks. Sally.
I like the description of singing your heart out. If you've ever experienced that, singing your heart out, you are not thinking about anything else. You're not thinking about yourself singing. You're singing your heart out. It's that intense of a focus that does bring joy. And is expressed, other people see it as enthusiasm. I think the internal feeling is joy.
Yeah. Thank you, Sally. Dan.
Unmute. When I think of enthusiasm, I think about why people might not be enthusiastic. And I think about the socialization and the conformity that is often imposed on children by their parents, people in their faith communities, even organizations. And those pressures prevent us from letting the emotions out. We're even taught not to feel, get back up there and get back in. All of those kinds of inhibitory factors. And it reminds me of a concept in psychology called differentiation, which means we learn to be standing on our own 2 feet, not affected by the opinions of others. And one of the ways we achieve that is by filling ourselves with the divine. Because if we're filled with the divine, then that's what matters the most. Or for those who can identify with an identity with spirit, because spirit, permeates everything. And the wonderful thing about being filled with spirit is it's infectious. And we can have a positive impact on others by releasing the natural feelings that well up inside of us and not hold ourselves back. That's all.
It is contagious. When you're in the presence of someone that has that spirit, it's contagious. You receive it, you feel it. Anybody else want to say anything? We're going to shift to forgiveness in just a minute, but it occurred to me, do you know how people keep gratitude journals? Or any of you familiar with gratitude journals? It's a way to kind of pick up your life a little bit. You list some things you're grateful for. I wonder if we had enthusiasm journals, and this is shifting from enthusiasm as a trait of personality to just things that just elicit enthusiasm. We just are kind of enthusiastic about it. What would be, as Sophia's named one, the Medina, what would be some other things that you'd like to lift up and say, I think this would be on my enthusiasm journal? Anybody else? Anybody want to say anything? Share your enthusiasm journal, just a thing or two. Eileen?
Yeah, I just want to say, first of all, listening to Sophia's, like how they do it every day and fast basically together, but in separate areas, but then come together and all of a sudden can share that with each other is so different than in the Christian, my religion, my faith, whatever my journey is, that we do it alone by ourselves in our houses. And even when we come together, I mean, the choir for me is something that always lifts me up because they are so enthusiastic and they're so beautiful, and it just resonates with my soul. And that, but there's still this separation. It's not, I'm not part of that. I'm listening to it. I'm taking it in. So, so I need to think about that, like in my practice, how I bring that in, because it seems to be so natural with what Said said. I mean, Sophia said about, you know, at the end of the day, at the end of the time that you've done this all day, then you can be together and you have all this joy. You can. I almost felt that, like just listening to her talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Eileen. Jennifer.
What I got confused about enthusiasm in a sense because there's so few things that I'm not enthusiastic about. I love music, I love gardening, I love cooking, I adore dogs. I call myself a dog whisperer. But the thing that I got to in the midst of that ponder is God has created all of this for our joy. And so if we really appreciate each thing that we have joy in, we're giving praise to God. We're thanking God. And in that moment, in that gratitude moment for the creation that we've been given, whether it's the pain of the loss of a dog or the death of a plant in a freeze, it's something that we're to learn from and grow through. And so I'm enthusiastic about all of that. And it's just, enthusiasm is everywhere if you consider everything a gift from God. And that's essentially all I wanted to say.
You may be one of those enthusiasm personality types. Okay, Anne and Nita, and then we'll shift to forgiveness. Anne, do you want to say something or just leave it what was in your chat? Yeah, go ahead.
What's in the chat is fine, but just to say thank you, because the discussion today really helped me to understand enthusiasm in a way that works for me. So thank you for that.
Good, great. Nita.
Well, I really didn't have anything to add except what I put in the chat, and that is that it seems to me that gratitude gives birth to joy, and joy has the potential to give birth to enthusiasm. I think it's all connected. So
yeah, I think that I can't quite separate in my own mind enthusiasm from joy and gratitude, that they really are woven together too. So I think the letters are interwoven in important ways.
Yeah, me too.
Well, friends, let's take a little shift if we can. And this is totally different. Speaking of the letters being connected, I'm not sure what the connections are between enthusiasm and forgiveness. And if you can find them, great. I'm sure you can make them. But let me say a few things to get things started, and let's see where we end up. There's a theologian that I really admire, and her name is Marjorie Suhaki. And you don't need to write that down. It sounds Japanese, but she had a Japanese husband, Marjorie Suhaki, and she wrote a lot on forgiveness. And Marjorie also knew what it was like to be abused, spousal abuse. So the theme of forgiveness didn't come to her just naturally and easily. It wasn't a Pollyanna view of forgiveness. She really needed to think about forgiveness in a deep way. And she was very much aware of people who've been harmed. And the last thing in the world that they ever want to do is be around or close to the people that have harmed them. So she wanted to avoid an overly sentimental understanding of forgiveness where it sounds like affection.
Mm-hmm.
So get affection out of the way, she said. Get wanting to be around them out of the way. What then is forgiveness? And I want to tell you what she said, and it may or may not be right, but it's worth thinking about. She said that forgiveness is an act of the will. It's something you sometimes have to make yourself do. And she said it is willing the well-being of the other, even if you can't stand them. So it's willing the well-being of someone, even if you can't stand them. And even if you feel like they have done great harm, and maybe they have. And that links a little bit with the loving kindness meditation. Some of you may be familiar with the loving kindness meditation in Buddhism. My wife does it. And it has an effect on the heart, and maybe you know how it goes. You sit quietly, and first you lift up yourself in your mind, and you say, may I be happy, may I be peaceful, may I be whole. You say it 3 times, and you mean it. And then you lift up somebody that you're close to, a friend, your partner. I'll invent a name. May Julie be happy. May Julie be peaceful. May Julie be whole. And you mean it. And then you lift up someone that's neutral to you. You kind of don't even know them very well at all. Maybe you just bumped into them on the street or in a store. So take a store clerk in a grocery store. And that store clerk just took your money, and then you went on. And you picture that person. May you be happy. May you be whole. May you be peaceful. And then, you guessed it, you picture somebody that you just plain don't like. And it can be because you think they've done great harm, or it can just be that you find them repugnant, and you lift them up. And you say, and by the way, I bet you can think of a few people that you might do in this meditation right there. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. May you be whole. It doesn't mean you like them. It doesn't mean you'd vote for them. But you will their well-being. And then the last one is you do it for the whole universe. And my wife, Kathy, she loves to name, may all the animals, all the plants, all the rivers, all the stars, all the galaxies, all the black holes, all the extraterrestrial beings on other planets. May they all be happy, all be peaceful, all be whole. And there are many studies. At Stanford, for example, Stanford has a whole department that specializes in compassion studies. Yale does too. There are many studies that show that this meditation actually has an effect, a positive effect on people's lives. It lightens the load and it frees them a little bit of resentment. Because the thing that burdens so many people, that's so hard for so many of us, for me, is resentment. It can burn you up. So the loving kindness meditation and or Marjorie Suhaki's insight are both, the point is it really helps heal the forgiver. It really lightens their load. Okay. Does that way of thinking about forgiveness make any sense to you? Or do you think, no, I think I'm going to go a very different route. I don't think that's forgiveness at all, or here's what I'd like to say. Does that elicit any thoughts for you or comments that you would like to make? I have subsequent questions, but we can stop right there and you can say, yeah, that makes sense, or that doesn't make sense, whatever. Anybody?
I just want to
Eileen.
say something really quickly, because this reminds me very much of a time in my life when I thought I was fully capable of murder, which is not something I ever believed about myself. And it was because someone that I brought into my children's lives did something awful. And I had never felt so much hate and anger, and I just didn't think I could get through it. And Peggy Bossmeyer was my priest at the time, and at St. Michael's in Little Rock, and I went to her for confession, and she simply said to me, say you forgive this person. And I said, but I don't. And she said, that's okay. God will take it from there. And I can talk about this now without all the, because it was really true. I mean, it was, I had to forgive myself. I had to realize that bad things happened, and but I think that fits in here somehow. So I just want to share it.
That's so interesting, Eileen, too, about how sometimes saying something, you can't feel it, but you can say it. It's an action that can, rituals can do that too, rituals. Anybody else on forgiveness? Just want to say something about what it means to you, or what you think it is, or why it's important. Anybody else? Dan. And then Jennifer.
To me, forgiveness is letting go. And I'm glad you raised resentments in connection with forgiveness, because someone said resentments are like poison we give ourselves, hoping someone else will be affected. And it's really a self-inhibitor. And so I read a little book called The Secret of Forgiveness that prescribed a process for forgiveness. And he suggested the first thing you have to do is get in touch with the pain and allow yourself to feel the pain, because often we don't, because of our conditioning. And once feeling the pain, then find a trusted friend, someone you know will not judge you, not criticize you, not try to change you, but is there just to hold a space for you to express your pain, and then validate. Yes, if I had had that experience, I would have had that pain. And he says there's something about feeling the pain, expressing it, and having it validated that sets you up to let go of it. So it's not running around in the brain like a gerbil on a wheel, because you've gotten it outside of yourself and you had it validated. You don't have to keep wondering, am I right to think this way? Am I bad to think this way? It's been validated, and now you're set up to let go. And it's the letting go of it that brings the peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Sally.
I always have a comment. Is forgiving the person, I don't really know the answer. Is forgiving the person different from forgiving a deed?
Right.
Something that a person did.
Hmm.
Is that like holding back a little bit, or I don't know. I just would like to hear what people have to say about that. The deed versus the person.
I have views on that, but I'll hold them. Anybody else? Do you distinguish yourself between the sinner and the sin? The person who did the evil deed and the deed itself? And can you forgive the person, but still not the deed at all? Or by contrast, are they not so separable? Sally, you probably said it simply and better than I just said it, but I think that's, if we both pose the question, that'll, what do you all think? Is there a difference between the deed and the doer?
I think there is. I think it's a major issue, and that it means that person, whoever it was, is not necessarily evil or bad. They're uneducated. They're not trained. They have pain that supersedes caring about others. Their pain is it's hurt people who hurt people. But if we hold on to those resentments, we're not hurting them. Like Dan said about poison, that's why I put my hand down. Thanks, Dan. It's like you're trying to give somebody poison and you actually are hurting yourself. You die if you hold that resentment. So to me, if you separate the deed from the person, you recognize their inherent nobility and allow them the opportunity to grow through it. But if you don't, if you don't ever have to accept the deed. So that's all I want to say. Sorry.
Gotcha. Yeah. David, and then Deb.
I just wanted to say, I think that sometimes we separate the deed, the sin from the sinner, so to speak, as a way of really avoiding dealing with the person, and really dealing with the issue at hand. And so when it's meant like that, I don't think that's particularly helpful or healthy. But following up on what the contributor just said, without forgiveness, there is no future relationship. And even if we have to forgive somebody that's gone, again, maybe that is still a relationship that needs to be healed and carried forward. Not for everybody, but sometimes.
I want to thank David for mentioning forgiving people that are gone. Peggy Hayes once said to me, when my father died, she was an Episcopal priest. She said, relationships don't end with death. And sometimes they get better. And my relationship with my dad was a good one, but the whole idea that relationships can improve after death, I thought was a very interesting insight. Interesting. Deb. Deb, we can't hear you.
The most obvious thing that comes to mind when I think of separating action from the person is with children. Parents can get extremely angry and volatile to their children who are just doing what children do or who don't know any other way to be. So that's the most obvious one. I read a memoir by Farley Mowat when he lived with Eskimos up in Canada, in northern Canada. And he said that he got into a discussion with a particularly unruly child, and the parent was just so patient and loving, and said that in his society, and the Eskimo said, but my God, how can you be angry at a child? How can you hit a child? They're just little. And that was, really that's the first thing that comes to mind. And I also have gone through forgiveness with especially my father after he died, and definitely relationship improved after he died, as well as my grandfather, uncles. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was.
So I thought it was really interesting. I don't know if it was Sophia or you, Jay, that put the Babemba, I may be mispronouncing that, tribe. of
It
South
was
Africa.
Sandy, I think.
Oh,
Or
Sandy. Well, it was wonderful because I was thinking about that. All of everybody having a chance to go through everything that this person had done that was bad, and then having this giant feast afterwards, I guess, after forgiveness. And
Yes.
it was
Was
just
that you, Sophia, or Sandy? I forget which one.
Jay, yeah, let me read it out because maybe some of you didn't get a chance to read it. Yes, I put it there because I just absolutely love that tradition. It's just amazing. Or Jay, would you like to read it?
No, you read it, please.
So in the Babemba tribe of South Africa, when a person acts irresponsibly or unjustly or make a mistake towards other or wrong someone, he is placed in the center of the village, alone and unfettered. All work ceases, and every man, woman, and child in the village gather in a large circle around the accused individual. Then each person in the tribe speaks to the accused, one at a time, each person recalling the good things that person in the center of the circle has done in his lifetime. Every incident, every experience that can be recalled with any detail and accuracy is recounted about that accused person. And then all his positive attributes, good deeds, strengths, and kindnesses are recited carefully and at length. This tribal ceremony at Babemba tribe of South Africa often lasts for several days. And at the end of the ceremony, the tribal circle is broken, a joyous celebration takes place, and the person is symbolically and literally welcomed back into the tribe. I think it's so beautiful. I would welcome anyone's comments on that.
It literally brought tears to my eyes when I read it. So thank you.
I think the love the tribe shows this person who has in some way had a negative effect on their world, that love has caused that person's heart to heal rather than being shamed or others holding resentment. Everybody gets better in that moment. It is a beautiful way to deal with a misbehavior rather than punishment repercussion.
Let's turn briefly to two more subjects. And here's, we've been talking about forgiving others. I'm wondering what it's like to receive forgiveness and also to need forgiveness and to be afraid, maybe, to ask for it, or even to admit it to yourself. Has anybody ever been in that situation where you were afraid, to acknowledge your own need for forgiveness? Is that anybody's ever known? I guess if I were you, I wouldn't say anything right now.
Well,
I don't know.
I'll say
Go
something.
ahead,
So once a year before Yom Kippur, where it's suggested that we go to people before we can ask God for forgiveness for what we've done with God, our relationship with God, we need to go to human beings because God cannot forgive us for something that a human can forgive us. Some kind of a rift that we've had with another human being. So in some cases, when we go up to someone, it's not so difficult. I mean, I'm so sorry that I said such and such or did such and such but sometimes it's extremely difficult to, number one, think that what I've done, conjure up what I've done and how it might have hurt someone, and then to approach that person who might not have felt that I've wronged them. And now I'm going to bring something up that perhaps I would be better being quiet about, but so there are, in some cases, I like make a list and then I say, okay, this is going to be easy. And then I'm going to save this for later and see. And then I have to admit to you and to this group that there are sometimes on that list that I don't have the koach, the strength to do what I am supposed to do because it puts me in a very awkward position. But maybe after having this conversation, I'll have enthusiasm for doing this for, when Yom Kippur comes up.
Oh, Ellen, thank you for that connection. Yeah, anybody else want to? That's such a great story.
Hey, Ellen, this is Jerry. I think you get bonus points for relatives. I do think that relatives, of course, all of these are relatives in some form, but, I'm speaking from a personal situation because I've kind of buried a problem I've had with my older brother, and he's buried it as well. And we have these oblique discussions, or we had no discussions for a good number of years. And then we've had this kind of creeping, kind of a dance around it. And so it's really, I think we both acknowledge a problem, but we haven't confronted it. So it is kind of a long simmering issue.
Jerry, and that gets to the issue of kind of indirect forgiveness. You know what I mean? You don't say it, you don't exactly confront it, but you spend a little time together. And maybe forgiveness happens in a certain way, even when it's not so direct. Kyle.
Yes,
Kyle Russell.
And on this, on the subject, and it brought to mind anybody that's ever worked through 12-step programs. This is some of the steps involve coming up with a list of amends to be made, things that you've done wrong, and then presenting that to your sponsor or to another human being who you can kind of bounce it off of and then make decisions. Okay, how do I make amends to correct this wrong? Do I go to this person to ask forgiveness? Or sometimes maybe it's best not to, because you may damage their life if you bring up something way from the past. So anyway, these sorts of issues, but it's very cleansing. It's a very cleansing process because you go through a very deep self-inventory of your past wrongs and rights. And it's very freeing. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle. I've had students that have gone through 12-step programs and come to me asking for forgiveness for things that they talked behind my back or things like that I was totally unaware of. But it took great courage on their part.
Yeah.
Now, anybody else on this? I think another subject we might just bring up is God and forgiveness. Oh, there's one other subject. I'm so sorry. I wanted to mention, but we probably can't talk about it. It's the tradition of loving your enemy. Loving your enemy. And in Jesus, in the New Testament, he didn't say a lot of unique things. Legend has it he said a lot of unique things, but you can find them in many places. But one thing he did say, part of his ministry, was it's important to love your enemy and forgive others, but loving the enemy. And I was wondering, was loving your enemy part of the tradition in which you grew up? Was that a theme that was lifted up? Not all at once.
That's not a theme that I recall learning in my Jewish education, except to say that I had an aunt who had come from Eastern Europe and lived through pogroms, those kinds of things. And her watchwords to us as kids, and then until she died, was to kill them with kindness. So you are confronted with someone that you don't like. I don't know that she would call them an enemy necessarily, but that you don't like. And the best way to deal with that relationship is to kill them with kindness, to be so gracious that they have to, at some level, lose whatever it is that is so distasteful.
Well, all right. That's a good weapon, huh? Kindness. So I think we need to bring this to a close. Now I need to turn it over to Sophia to bring this gathering to a close.
Thank you.
But thanks to everybody.
Thank you so much. I would say a word or two about forgiveness in response to your question. And then close it probably if I have time with the practice that I do for forgiveness. I also don't see this theme of loving your enemy in my religion. It might be there, but I haven't seen it much in Islam. What I see is being kind to your enemy, being just to your enemy. But I don't see this theme of loving your enemy. When I read the scripture, I do see the theme of forgiveness over and over and over again. And I think forgiveness is a raised up value in all the religions, but I'm specifically talking about Islam. When I did some research on our scripture and I saw that God has told us to forgive others who have wronged us over 230 times in our small scripture, which is a lot, 230 times. And one of the name of gods is Al-Ghafur. That's how we recognize and understand divine in our life, through his names. And one of the name is Al-Ghafur, which means the one who forgives, the forgiver. So God loves to forgive, and he keeps on telling us to forgive. And honestly, I could never understand why so much emphasis on forgiveness, because it's so easy. If somebody has been mean to you at workspace or in the grocery store or in a meeting, I mean, it takes 2-3 days to get that resentment out of the heart, but it happens. It's easy. And I didn't understand it till the day somebody really close to me, somebody that I loved, somebody that I deeply trusted, wronged me, betrayed me. I would say betrayed me is a better word. And that's when I understood that the hurt that I experienced, that's when I understood that how hard it is to forgive others, especially ones who are close to us, especially the one that we love, and then they hurt us. It's extremely hard to forgive them and go back to them and have that open dialogue that we need to have with them. So anyways, what I realized in my own life is that it's easier for me to go back and have a dialogue and seek forgiveness after I have forgiven them myself in my own heart. That is the first step. And I thought that I will close today with a spiritual practice that I do on a daily basis, because it took me 7 months to forgive that person who betrayed me. 7 months is a long time to live with a resentment. And it didn't kill me, but it was very harmful for my own heart and my own spiritual practice. So what I would say to close is that remember that forgiveness is not, for many of us like me, it's not a one-time event. It's a lifelong process, and we have to do it over and over again. And a good place to start is to develop your own practice of forgiveness. maybe on a daily basis. So I have this practice, which I don't know where I learned it from, but every night before I go to bed, I do a small self-reflection. It's a 3-step practice, which I'll give you, a very simple 3-step practice. So first step is that you think truthfully about one hurt that you have not been able to forgive. So think about one specific hurt in your life that you have not been able to forgive. That's step 1. And then step 2 is, and only one hurt, not more than that. And then second step is that you identify any associated feelings that you might have with that hurt. Identify any associated feelings that you might have with that one hurt that you have not been able to forgive. And those feelings might be anger, resentment, guilt, shame, embarrassment, any associated feelings. Now imagine, what would life be like if you live without that feeling? What would it be like to live without that feeling? Whatever it is, resentment, anger, hurt. Then you find a forgiveness prayer, your forgiveness prayer. You could use one that Jay taught us in the beginning, or anything from your own scripture, your own religion, and say that prayer and let that feeling go. You let it go by breathing it out of your system. And then you do it again and again. So you think of one hurt that you have not been able to forgive. Think of any associated feelings with that hurt that you have been holding on to. Imagine how would it feel to live without that feeling, and then breathe it out of your system 3 times. And do it over and over again every night. This practice has helped me to forgive others in my own heart. And once I've forgiven them, it's easy to move on and seek their forgiveness as well. With that, my gratitude to all of you for helping us cultivate this interfaith space where we can learn more about spiritual practices from each one of us, being co-teachers. I will see you all next week, next Wednesday, with G for gratitude and H for hospitality. Until then, peace, salam, and shalom.